The key turned in Lisa's front door with the familiar ease of 15 years of friendship, but what Sarah Williams saw when she stepped into the foyer would shatter her world in ways she never could have imagined. "Lisa? I brought the files you forgot at work," Sarah called out, juggling the stack of legal documents while kicking off her heels in the entryway of her best friend's downtown apartment. The October afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors that should have felt welcoming but somehow seemed ominous. The silence that greeted her was unusual. Lisa Martinez was never quiet. She was the kind of person who filled every space with laughter, conversation, and the sound of whatever cooking experiment was happening in her kitchen. But today, the apartment felt different. Tense. Secretive. "Lisa." Sarah called again, her voice echoing off the exposed brick walls of the converted loft. She set the files on the kitchen counter and noticed 2 coffee cups in the sink, both still warm. Lisa lived alone and rarely had morning visitors on weekdays. That's when she heard it. The sound of running water from the bathroom, followed by voices, 2 voices, one of which made her blood run cold. "I think we're almost done," came Lisa's familiar laugh, muffled by the bathroom door. "Just a few more minutes and we'll have everything ready." "Good," replied a deeper voice that Sarah recognized with a kind of bone-deep certainty that comes from sharing a bed with someone for 8 years. "Sarah can't know about any of this. Not yet." The voice belonged to her husband, David Williams. Sarah felt the world tilt on its axis as the implications crashed over her like a tsunami. David was supposed to be at his architecture firm downtown, working on the Henderson project that had been consuming his evenings for weeks. Lisa was supposed to be single, having just ended her relationship with Marcus 3 months earlier. And neither of them was supposed to be in Lisa's bathroom together at 2:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, talking about keeping secrets from Sarah. The water stopped running. Sarah stood frozen in the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs as she tried to process what she was hearing. Her mind raced through explanations, innocent reasons why her husband and best friend would be in a bathroom together, why they would be keeping secrets from her. But as the bathroom door opened and footsteps moved across the apartment, every innocent explanation crumbled into dust. "Hand me that towel," David's voice carried clearly from the hallway, intimate and comfortable in a way that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd been in Lisa's apartment when Sarah wasn't around. "Here," Lisa replied, her voice carrying the kind of gentle affection that Sarah had always thought was reserved for their friendship. "You missed a spot on your shoulder." The casual intimacy in their exchange hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't a chance encounter or a sudden moment of weakness. This was comfortable, familiar, ongoing. Sarah's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the granite countertop, her mind struggling to reconcile what she was hearing with everything she thought she knew about the 2 people she trusted most in the world. 8 years of marriage to David. 15 years of friendship with Lisa. Shared secrets, mutual support, and the kind of trust that had made her give Lisa a key to her house and David her heart without reservation. All of it was crashing down around her as she listened to her husband and best friend moving around Lisa's apartment with the ease of long practice. "We should probably get dressed," David said, his voice growing closer to the kitchen. "If Sarah shows up unexpectedly." "She won't," Lisa interrupted. "She's in court all afternoon with the Morrison case. We have at least 3 hours. 3 hours for what?" Sarah's mind supplied a dozen devastating possibilities, each one more painful than the last. Have you ever had a moment where your entire understanding of your life changed in an instant? How did you find the strength to keep breathing? Sarah realized she had 2 choices: confront them now and face whatever truth was waiting, or slip out quietly and pretend this moment had never happened. The sound of footsteps approaching the kitchen made the decision for her. She grabbed her purse and backed toward the front door, but it was too late. David appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing nothing but a white towel around his waist, his dark hair still damp from the shower. His face was flushed, whether from hot water or physical exertion, Sarah couldn't tell. Behind him, Lisa emerged wearing a silk robe that Sarah had never seen before, something expensive and intimate that suggested it had been purchased for exactly these kinds of encounters. The three of them stood frozen in a tableau of discovery that would be burned into Sarah's memory forever. David's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, guilt, fear, and something else that Sarah couldn't identify. Lisa's expression was pure panic, her hands flying to her mouth as she realized their secret was no longer safe. "Sarah," David said, his voice cracking with shock. "What are you doing here?" The question was so absurd that Sarah almost laughed. What was she doing in her best friend's apartment? What was she doing discovering her husband emerging from another woman's shower? "I brought Lisa the file she forgot," Sarah managed to say, her voice sounding strangely calm despite the chaos in her chest. "What are you doing here, David?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine waiting to drop. Lisa stepped forward, her face pale with what looked like genuine anguish. "Sarah, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" Sarah's voice was gaining strength, fueled by a rage that was building like a storm. "Because it looks like my husband just came out of your shower wearing nothing but a towel while you're standing there in a robe, talking about keeping secrets from me." David reached for her, but Sarah stepped back as if his touch would burn her. "Sarah, please," David said, "let us explain." "Explain what?" Sarah's voice cracked with the pain of betrayal. "Explain how long this has been going on. Explain how many times you've lied to me. Explain how my best friend and my husband decided to destroy my life." The accusations flew out of her like arrows, each one hitting its target with devastating accuracy. David flinched with every word, while Lisa stood motionless, tears streaming down her face. But what Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined in her worst nightmare, was that the scene she was witnessing wasn't evidence of the ultimate betrayal. It was evidence of the ultimate act of love. And in exactly 6 days, on her 30th birthday, Sarah was going to discover that the worst moment of her life had actually been preparation for the most beautiful surprise she'd ever received. 3 weeks before Sarah Williams walked into the nightmare that would become her greatest joy, David Williams had been staring at a blank piece of paper in their home office, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he wanted to create for his wife's 30th birthday. Sarah was the kind of person who made everyone around her feel special. As a family law attorney, she spent her days fighting for families torn apart by abuse and neglect, often working pro bono for clients who couldn't afford legal representation. She remembered birthdays, sent thoughtful cards for no reason, and had a gift for making ordinary moments feel magical. But Sarah had never had a magical birthday of her own. Growing up in foster care after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12, Sarah had learned to expect disappointment around special occasions. Foster families meant well, but birthdays were often forgotten in the chaos of temporary arrangements and overwhelmed caregivers. She'd spent her 18th birthday alone in a group home, and most of her 20s celebrating quietly with whatever boyfriend she'd been dating at the time. David had been trying to change that pattern since they'd gotten married, but his previous attempts had fallen short of the spectacular celebration he knew Sarah deserved. She always claimed to love his simple dinners and small gifts, but David could see the wistful look in her eyes when she watched romantic comedies where elaborate surprise parties transformed ordinary women into queens for a day. This year was going to be different. This year, David was going to give Sarah the kind of birthday that would make up for 29 years of overlooked celebrations. The problem was that David Williams, while brilliant at designing buildings, was spectacularly incompetent at party planning. His first attempt at organizing had been a disaster. He tried to book the rooftop restaurant where they'd had their first date, only to discover it had been closed for renovations for 6 months. His backup choice, the art gallery where Sarah volunteered, was already reserved for a corporate event. Every venue he called seemed to be booked, overpriced, or completely wrong for the intimate but elegant celebration he envisioned. After 2 weeks of failed phone calls and mounting frustration, David had done what every desperate husband throughout history had done. He'd called his wife's best friend for help. Lisa Martinez had been Sarah's friend since college, and in the 15 years since they'd graduated, she'd become the sister Sarah had never had. Lisa was everything that David wasn't when it came to social planning: creative, organized, and blessed with an intuitive understanding of what would make people happy. "David," Lisa had said when he'd called her in near panic, "you're overthinking this. Sarah doesn't want some generic party venue. She wants something personal, something that shows how much thought you put into understanding what she needs." "That's the problem," David had admitted. "I don't know what she needs. I know she deserves something amazing, but every idea I have sounds either too small or too overwhelming." Lisa had been quiet for a long moment, and David could practically hear her brain working through possibilities. "What if we used my apartment?" Lisa had finally suggested. "It's got that great open floor plan, the view of the city, and Sarah has always loved the way I've decorated it. We could transform it into something magical just for her." The idea had been perfect. Lisa's loft was spacious enough for the intimate gathering David envisioned, but personal enough to feel like a celebration created specifically for Sarah rather than a generic party. "But Lisa," David had said, "that's a huge imposition. You'd have to let us take over your space for days of preparation." "David," Lisa had replied firmly, "Sarah is my best friend. There's nothing I wouldn't do to make her happy. Besides, I've been looking for an excuse to redecorate anyway." What had followed was 3 weeks of the most intensive party planning David had ever experienced. Lisa had connections everywhere: florists who owed her favors, caterers who specialized in intimate gatherings, and decorators who could transform a space into something magical. But more than that, Lisa understood Sarah in ways that David was still learning after 8 years of marriage. "Sarah doesn't want to be the center of attention," Lisa had explained during one of their planning sessions. "She wants to feel surrounded by love. The decorations shouldn't scream 'look at me,' they should whisper 'you are cherished.'" Lisa had designed a celebration that honored Sarah's personality perfectly. The decorations would be elegant but not overwhelming: fairy lights and flowers that would make the space feel enchanted without being theatrical. The food would include Sarah's favorite dishes from childhood, the few recipes she remembered from her mother's cooking. The guest list would be small but meaningful: the people who had supported Sarah through law school, her colleagues from the firm, and the families she'd helped who had become friends rather than just clients. When you love someone who has never been properly celebrated, how do you create something meaningful enough to make up for all the times they were overlooked? The planning had consumed both David and Lisa's free time for weeks. They'd met during lunch breaks to coordinate details, spent evenings shopping for decorations, and worked through weekends to prepare elements that could be assembled quickly on the day of the party. David had taken vacation days under false pretenses, claiming he needed time to work on a personal project, which was technically true, just not the kind of project Sarah would have suspected. Lisa had rearranged her work schedule to accommodate the dozens of tasks that required coordination with vendors, decorators, and caterers. They'd become a team united by their shared love for Sarah and their determination to create something perfect for her. But they'd also become something else: conspirators in an elaborate deception that required constant lies, secret meetings, and careful coordination to keep Sarah from discovering their plans. The lies had been small at first: David claiming to work late when he was actually meeting with caterers, Lisa canceling dinner plans because she was too tired when she was really shopping for decorations. But as the party grew more elaborate, the deceptions had become more complex. David had to explain why he'd been making mysterious phone calls. Lisa had to justify why her apartment suddenly seemed off-limits to Sarah's impromptu visits. Both of them had to coordinate their stories to ensure that Sarah wouldn't become suspicious about their sudden unavailability. The most challenging part had been the previous week, when Lisa's apartment had needed to be partially transformed in advance. The birthday party was planned for Saturday evening, but some decorations required professional installation that couldn't happen on the day of the event. That's what had led to the scene Sarah had discovered. David had taken the morning off work to help Lisa with last-minute preparations. They'd been hanging fairy lights from the ceiling beams, a task that required David to climb on ladders, while Lisa directed the placement from below. The work had been dirty and exhausting, involving drilling and rewiring that had left both of them covered in dust and sweating from exertion. Lisa had insisted they both shower before the afternoon installations began, partly for cleanliness but mostly because they had another round of vendors arriving to deliver furniture and decorations. They'd been discussing final details while getting cleaned up, coordinating the timeline for Saturday's setup, and reviewing the guest list to ensure no one had been forgotten. It had been completely innocent, two people working together to create something beautiful for someone they both loved. But to Sarah, walking in without context and hearing fragments of conversation about secrets and preparation time, it had looked like the ultimate betrayal. What Sarah had interpreted as evidence of an affair had actually been evidence of the most elaborate act of love that David and Lisa could imagine. Proof that her husband and best friend cared about her happiness enough to sacrifice weeks of their own time and comfort to create something magical for her. The cruel irony was that Sarah's worst fear had been created by the very people who loved her most, working together to prove exactly how much she meant to them. In 6 days, when Sarah walked into Lisa's transformed apartment and saw 24 people who had gathered to celebrate her, she would understand that the moment that had broken her heart had actually been proof of how deeply she was cherished. But first, she had to survive the devastation of believing that love had been a lie. The first humiliation came not from the discovery itself, but from David and Lisa's panicked attempts to explain without revealing the surprise, leaving Sarah to fill in the devastating blanks with her own imagination. "Sarah, you have to listen to us," David said, his voice desperate as he tightened the towel around his waist. "This is not what you think." "Really?" Sarah's voice carried a dangerous calm that was far more frightening than screaming would have been. "Then tell me exactly what this is, David. Explain to me why my husband is coming out of my best friend's shower at 2:30 on a Wednesday afternoon." Lisa stepped forward, her silk robe clutched tightly around her body, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, I can explain everything, but you have to promise to trust me." "Trust you?" Sarah's laugh was sharp and bitter. "I walk into your apartment to find my husband half naked and you want me to trust you? The time for trust was before you started sleeping with my husband." "We're not sleeping together," David and Lisa said simultaneously, their voices overlapping in what sounded like rehearsed denial. The synchronized response only made things worse. To Sarah, it sounded like they'd practiced this conversation, prepared for the moment when they might be caught. "Don't," Sarah said, holding up her hand to stop their explanations. "Don't lie to me anymore. I can see what's happening here." She gestured toward David's state of undress, Lisa's expensive robe, the comfortable intimacy between them that spoke of ongoing familiarity. "How long?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking despite her attempt to maintain composure. "How long have you two been making a fool of me?" David reached for his clothes, which were draped over a chair in Lisa's living room, another detail that suggested this wasn't a spontaneous encounter. "Sarah, if you'll just let us get dressed and sit down, we can explain everything," David said, pulling on his shirt with shaking hands. "Explain everything?" Sarah's voice rose as her control began to slip. "What's to explain? You're here in her apartment, coming out of her shower, talking about keeping secrets from me. The only thing I need explained is how stupid you think I am." Lisa was sobbing now, her face buried in her hands. "Sarah, please. You're my best friend. I would never hurt you. Your best friend. Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief. Best friends don't sleep with each other's husbands. Best friends don't lie and scheme and betray the people who trust them most. The accusation hit Lisa like a physical blow, and she sank onto her couch as if her legs wouldn't support her anymore. We're not, Lisa tried to speak through her tears, but the words wouldn't come. David, now fully dressed, moved toward Sarah with his hands extended in a gesture of peace. Sarah, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, what you're thinking is not happening. Then what is happening? Sarah demanded. Give me one innocent explanation for this scene. Give me one reason why my husband is in my best friend's apartment, coming out of her shower, while she's wearing a robe and you're both talking about keeping secrets from me. The challenge hung in the air like a test that David and Lisa couldn't pass without ruining the surprise they'd spent weeks planning. David's face went through several expressions as he struggled to find words that would reassure Sarah without revealing the birthday party. But every innocent explanation he could think of sounded ridiculous or unbelievable. We were. David started, then stopped, realizing that any lie would only make things worse when Sarah eventually learned the truth. His silence was damning. To Sarah, it looked like guilt and an inability to construct a believable cover story. You can't even make something up, Sarah said, her voice hollow with pain. That's how guilty you are. You can't even lie convincingly anymore. Lisa looked up from her hands, her face streaked with tears and desperation. Sarah, I'm begging you. Give us 6 days. In 6 days, everything will make sense. The request was the worst thing she could have said. To Sarah, it sounded like Lisa was asking for 6 more days to continue the affair before confessing or leaving town. 6 days. Sarah's voice rose to a pitch that suggested her composure was finally breaking completely. You want 6 more days to keep sleeping with my husband? You want me to go home and pretend I don't know what's happening while you two finish whatever this is? No. David said, stepping forward urgently. Sarah, that's not what she means. Then what does she mean? Sarah demanded. What happens in 6 days? What's so special about 6 days from now? David and Lisa exchanged a look that was loaded with meaning, a communication that excluded Sarah completely and confirmed her worst suspicions about their relationship. When the people you trust most can't explain their behavior without making it worse, how do you find the strength to demand truth? That look, that moment of silent communication between her husband and best friend, was what finally broke Sarah's composure completely. Get out, she said quietly. Sarah, David started. Get out. Sarah screamed, her voice echoing off the loft's high ceilings. Both of you get away from me. I can't look at either of you right now. This is my apartment, Lisa said softly, which was exactly the wrong thing to say. Your apartment where you've been sleeping with my husband, Sarah shot back. Your apartment where you've been lying to me for God knows how long. Your apartment where you've been planning my humiliation. Sarah grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but David blocked her path. Sarah, please don't leave like this, David pleaded. Come home with me. Let's talk about this properly. Talk about what? Sarah demanded. Talk about how you've been lying to me. Talk about how my best friend has been stabbing me in the back. Talk about how everyone I trusted has been making a fool of me. She pushed past David, but turned back at the door to deliver one final blow. I want you out of the house tonight, she told David. I don't care where you go, back here to a hotel, to hell for all I care. But I don't want to see you when I get home. Sarah. And Lisa, Sarah continued, turning to face her former best friend, lose my number. Lose my address. Lose any memory you ever had of calling yourself my friend. She slammed the door behind her with enough force to rattle the windows, leaving David and Lisa alone with the wreckage of their surprise party plans and the terrible knowledge that they'd just destroyed the happiness of the person they loved most. What Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't have known as she drove home through tears that made the road blur and waver, was that David and Lisa were sitting in that apartment crying as hard as she was. Not because they'd been caught, but because they'd just watched their elaborate act of love destroy the very person they'd been trying to celebrate. The surprise party was supposed to happen in 6 days. Now they had 6 days to figure out how to save their relationships with Sarah, before she learned that the worst moment of her life had been created by the people who loved her most. The escalation began that evening when Sarah returned home to find David packing a suitcase in their bedroom, his movements mechanical and defeated in a way that made her chest tighten with fresh pain. "You're actually leaving," Sarah said from the doorway, her voice carrying a mixture of surprise and hurt that she hadn't expected to feel. David looked up from folding his shirts, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "You told me to leave. I'm respecting your wishes. Where will you go?" The question escaped before Sarah could stop it, revealing a vulnerability she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "I don't know," David replied honestly. "A hotel, I guess." Lisa offered her couch, but I don't think that would help anything right now. The mention of Lisa sent a fresh wave of anger through Sarah's chest. "No, I imagine it wouldn't. You've probably spent enough time at Lisa's place recently." David's hands stilled on his clothes. "Sarah, I know you don't believe me, but nothing is happening between Lisa and me. Nothing romantic, nothing physical, nothing that betrays our marriage." "Then explain it," Sarah said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "Explain why I found you coming out of her shower. Explain why you were talking about keeping secrets from me. Explain why you've been lying about working late." David's face went through several emotions as he struggled with the impossible position of wanting to tell the truth without ruining the surprise. "I can't," he finally said, the words coming out like a confession of guilt. "You can't." Sarah's voice rose with disbelief. "Your marriage is falling apart, and you can't explain your behavior?" "Not yet," David said desperately. "Sarah, I'm asking you to trust me for just a few more days. Everything will make sense on Saturday." Saturday. The date hit Sarah like a revelation, and suddenly pieces of a horrible puzzle began falling into place. "Saturday is my birthday," she said slowly. David's face went white as he realized what he'd just revealed. "Oh my God," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger as understanding dawned. "You're planning to leave me on my birthday. You and Lisa are planning to leave me on my 30th birthday." "No," David said urgently. "Sarah, that's not." "That's why 6 days is so important," Sarah interrupted, her mind racing through the implications. "That's why everything will make sense on Saturday. You're waiting until after my birthday to officially end our marriage. How thoughtful of you both." The misunderstanding was so complete and so devastating that David actually staggered backward as if Sarah had hit him. "Sarah, you have everything wrong," he said, his voice breaking with desperation. "Everything you're thinking is the exact opposite of what's actually happening." "Is it?" Sarah demanded. "Then prove it. Tell me why you were at Lisa's. Tell me why you've been lying about your schedule. Tell me why my birthday is significant to your timeline." David opened his mouth, then closed it, trapped between wanting to save his marriage and wanting to preserve the surprise that had cost him weeks of planning. That's when the first twist occurred, something that would change Sarah's understanding of the situation without revealing the truth she wasn't ready to hear. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus Rivera, Lisa's ex-boyfriend, who had broken up with her 3 months earlier but remained friendly with both women. "Marcus." Sarah answered, her voice still shaky from the confrontation with David. Sarah, hey. Marcus's voice was warm but concerned. I hope I'm not calling it a bad time, but I wanted to check on Lisa. She called me about an hour ago, crying so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. Sarah felt the world shift slightly as she processed what Marcus was telling her. Lisa called you? Sarah asked, putting the phone on speaker so David could hear. Yeah, she was pretty upset, Marcus continued. Something about ruining everything and disappointing you? She kept saying she destroyed your friendship and that she'd never forgive herself. David was staring at the phone with an expression of growing hope, as if Marcus's call might provide the explanation he couldn't give himself. Marcus, Sarah said carefully, did Lisa say anything specific about what happened between us today? Not really, Marcus replied. She was pretty incoherent. But she did say something strange about David helping her with a project and how everything had gone wrong. She kept saying that you'd never understand and that she'd ruined the most important thing she'd ever tried to do for you. The words hit Sarah like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together, but suggested a picture she hadn't considered. A project. Sarah repeated. Yeah, something she and David were working on together. She mentioned weeks of planning and how everything was supposed to be perfect. Marcus paused. Sarah, is everything okay? Lisa sounded like her world was ending. Sarah looked at David, who was watching her with an expression that mixed hope and terror. Marcus, Sarah said slowly, how long has Lisa been planning this project? I don't know exactly, but she's been stressed about it for weeks. Every time we've talked lately, she's mentioned being busy with something important for you. She wouldn't tell me what it was, but she said it was the most meaningful thing she'd ever done. The pieces of information were creating a different picture, not of an affair, but of something else entirely. Something that involved weeks of planning, secrecy, and collaboration between David and Lisa for Sarah's benefit. Marcus, Sarah said, did Lisa ever mention my birthday in connection with this project? Your birthday. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Actually, yeah. She asked me about your favorite flowers a couple weeks ago. Said she was planning something special for your birthday but needed to get the details right. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet as she began to understand that her assumptions might have been wrong. And David was helping with this project, she asked. That was my impression, Marcus replied. Lisa kept talking about how grateful she was for David's help, how he understood exactly what you needed, and how they were working together to create something amazing. When new information challenges everything you believed about a situation, how do you find the courage to reconsider your conclusions? Sarah ended the call with Marcus and stared at David, who was watching her with an expression that begged her to understand without him having to explain. David, she said quietly, was Lisa planning something for my birthday? David's face went through several emotions before settling on resigned honesty. Sarah, I can't tell you exactly what we were planning without ruining it. But I can tell you that everything you saw today, everything you heard, everything that made you think the worst, it was all in service of trying to make your birthday the most special day you've ever had. The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to cross. You were planning my birthday party, she asked. We were planning something for you, David said carefully. Something that required weeks of coordination, multiple meetings, and yes, keeping secrets from you. Sarah sat down on their bed as the implications washed over her. If David and Lisa had been planning a surprise for her birthday, then everything she'd interpreted as evidence of an affair could have innocent explanations. The shower, she asked. We were hanging decorations. I was covered in dust and sweat from drilling and climbing ladders. Lisa insisted we both clean up before the afternoon deliveries arrived. The secrets you were talking about? Party details we couldn't let you know about. Guest lists, decorations, timing. All the elements of a surprise that would be ruined if you found out. The comfortable intimacy between you. 3 weeks of intensive planning creates a kind of partnership, David said. We've been spending a lot of time together, but only because we both love you and wanted to create something perfect. As Sarah processed this new understanding, she felt a complex mixture of relief, embarrassment, and lingering uncertainty. If David was telling the truth, then she'd just destroyed friendships and accused innocent people of betrayal because she jumped to the worst possible conclusions. But if he was lying, then this explanation was just another layer of deception designed to buy time and cover tracks. The question was, which David was she looking at? The husband who loved her enough to plan an elaborate surprise, or the man who would create an elaborate lie to cover an affair? Saturday was 4 days away. In 4 days, Sarah would discover which version of the truth was real. The emotional breakthrough that would transform Sarah's understanding came not from David's explanations, but from her own investigation into the truth behind his claims, an investigation that would force her to confront her deepest fears about love and abandonment. After David left for his hotel room, Sarah sat alone in their bedroom, staring at the suitcase he'd left behind in his hurry to respect her wishes. The house felt hollow without his presence, filled with the kind of silence that amplifies every doubt and fear. Unable to sleep, Sarah found herself walking through rooms that held 8 years of shared memories, looking for evidence that would either confirm or deny her worst suspicions about her marriage. She started in David's home office, searching through papers and files for any sign of deception. What she found instead was a folder labeled S's birthday hidden in his desk drawer, filled with vendor contracts, payment receipts, and planning notes that painted a picture of the most elaborate celebration she'd ever seen. The folder contained receipts for flowers, catering, decorations, and equipment rentals, thousands of dollars spent on what appeared to be a party for 30 people. There were handwritten notes in David's careful architect's script, detailing color schemes, menu preferences, and seating arrangements that showed an intimate knowledge of what would make Sarah happy. But it was the planning timeline that made Sarah's chest tighten with a mixture of guilt and growing understanding. David had started planning her party 6 weeks earlier. The first entry in his notebook was dated September 15th. Sarah mentioned never having a real birthday party, want to give her something magical. Every subsequent entry showed David's growing commitment to creating something perfect for her. He'd researched party planners, visited venues, and compiled lists of Sarah's favorite things with the attention to detail that he usually reserved for his most important architectural projects. And then, 3 weeks into his planning, the entries began mentioning Lisa. Called Lisa for help, I'm in over my head, David had written. She understands Sarah better than anyone. Need her expertise to make this work. What followed was a detailed record of David and Lisa's collaboration. Daily phone calls, shopping trips, coordination meetings, and the kind of intensive partnership that Sarah had mistaken for romantic intimacy. Lisa found the perfect florist. One entry read, "She knows Sarah loves peonies, but they're out of season. Florist can special order from greenhouse in Oregon." Another entry detailed Lisa's idea to include photos from Sarah's childhood. Lisa thinks we should create a memory wall with pictures from Sarah's life. She's going to contact Sarah's college friends for photos I've never seen. As Sarah read through weeks of planning notes, she began to understand the scope of what David and Lisa had been creating for her. This wasn't just a party. It was a comprehensive celebration of her life, carefully designed to honor every relationship and achievement that had shaped her into the person she'd become. But it was the final entry, written just 3 days earlier, that broke Sarah's heart completely. "Lisa and I are both nervous about pulling this off," David had written. "Sarah has never had people care enough to plan something like this for her. We want to show her how loved she is, how many people think she's extraordinary. Hope we can keep the secret for 3 more days." The words blurred as tears filled Sarah's eyes. David hadn't been hiding an affair. He'd been hiding the most comprehensive act of love she'd ever witnessed. When you discover that your deepest fears were created by the very love you thought you'd lost, how do you process the shame and relief of being wrong? Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Sarah, this is Carmen Rodriguez from the law clinic. Lisa gave me your number. I hope it's okay to text, but I wanted to confirm. Are we still planning to attend your birthday celebration on Saturday? Lisa said there might be some changes to the plans." Sarah stared at the message with growing confusion. Carmen was one of her colleagues from the legal aid clinic where she volunteered, but Sarah had never given Lisa her contact information. She responded, "I'm sorry, I think there might be some confusion. What birthday celebration?" Carmen's response came quickly. "The surprise party Lisa has been planning for you. She contacted everyone from the clinic weeks ago. We've all been so excited to celebrate you properly. You do so much for families in crisis. You deserve to be celebrated too." The message was followed by another. "Lisa showed us the memory wall she's creating with photos from your life. She's been working with David to contact people from every stage of your life. It's going to be beautiful." Sarah's hands were shaking as she typed back, "How many people are coming?" "About 30, I think. Lisa wanted to invite everyone whose life you've touched, but she was worried about overwhelming you. She said you're not comfortable being the center of attention, so she planned everything to feel intimate rather than overwhelming." As Sarah processed this information, her phone rang. It was Michelle, her friend from law school. "Sarah." Michelle's voice was warm and excited. "I just landed at LAX. I can't believe Lisa managed to keep this secret for so long. I've been dying to see your face when you walk into that party tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Saturday night, your birthday party," Michelle said, confusion creeping into her voice. "Sarah, are you okay? You sound strange." "Michelle," Sarah said carefully, "how long have you known about this party?" "Lisa called me 3 weeks ago," Michelle replied. "She explained that you'd never had a proper birthday celebration and asked if I could fly out to surprise you. She had this whole plan mapped out. She knew exactly who to invite, what kind of food you'd want, even what music would make you happy." Michelle paused, then continued with obvious concern, "Sarah, what's wrong? Did something happen with the party plans?" Sarah closed her eyes as the full magnitude of her mistake crashed over her. "Michelle, I think I may have ruined everything." "What do you mean?" "I thought." Sarah struggled to find words that wouldn't sound insane. "I misunderstood what David and Lisa were doing. I thought something was happening between them." "Between David and Lisa?" Michelle's voice carried genuine surprise. "Sarah, Lisa has been talking about you and David like you're the perfect couple. She's constantly saying how lucky you are to have found someone who loves you the way David does." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. While she'd been imagining betrayal, Lisa had been celebrating Sarah's marriage to anyone who would listen. "Michelle," Sarah said, "did Lisa seem happy about planning this party?" "Happy." Michelle laughed. "Sarah, I've never heard Lisa sound more excited about anything. She kept saying this was the most important thing she'd ever done, that she wanted to give you the kind of birthday that would make up for all the ones you missed." After ending the call with Michelle, Sarah sat in her empty house and tried to process the scope of what she'd destroyed. David and Lisa had spent weeks planning the most elaborate act of love she'd ever experienced. They'd coordinated with friends from every stage of her life, researched her preferences with scientific precision, and invested their time and money in creating something magical just for her. And Sarah had repaid their love by accusing them of the cruelest betrayal she could imagine. But as the shame washed over her, Sarah realized something else. She was terrified. terrified of accepting that people loved her enough to plan something this elaborate. Terrified of believing that she deserved the kind of celebration David and Lisa had created. Terrified of trusting that love this comprehensive could be real and lasting. Growing up in foster care had taught her that love was temporary, that people left, that counting on others led to disappointment. Even after 8 years with David, part of her still expected him to realize she wasn't worth staying for. When she'd walked into Lisa's apartment and seen what looked like evidence of betrayal, it had confirmed her deepest fear, that the love she'd built her life on was an illusion that would eventually shatter. But the truth was more terrifying than betrayal. The truth was that David and Lisa loved her so much they'd spent weeks of their lives creating joy for her. The truth was that 30 people cared enough about her to travel and gather in her honor. The truth was that she was worthy of the kind of love she'd always believed was reserved for other people. Sarah pulled out her phone and stared at David's contact information. In a few hours, it would be Thursday. The party was planned for Saturday evening. She had 2 days to decide whether she was brave enough to accept the love that had been offered to her, or whether she would let her fears destroy the most beautiful gift she'd ever received. But first, she had to find the courage to apologize to the 2 people who loved her most, and hope that their forgiveness was as generous as their hearts. The showdown that would determine the fate of Sarah's relationships began at 6 a.m. Thursday morning when she appeared at Lisa's apartment door, clutching David's planning folder and wearing the same clothes she'd had on the day before. Sarah. Lisa opened the door with swollen eyes and a face that showed she hadn't slept any more than Sarah had. "What are you doing here?" "I found this," Sarah said, holding up the folder labeled S's birthday. "I found David's planning notes, the receipts, the timeline. I found everything." Lisa's face crumpled as she realized what Sarah was holding. "You know about the party." "I know that I'm an idiot," Sarah replied, her voice thick with shame and exhaustion. "I know that I accused the 2 people who loved me most of betraying me when they were actually planning the most beautiful surprise of my life." Lisa stepped back to let Sarah into the apartment, and Sarah was shocked to see the extent of the damage her accusations had caused. The living room was partially decorated with fairy lights and flowers. Clearly Lisa had been working on party preparations until late into the night, even after their devastating confrontation. "Lisa," Sarah said, taking in the evidence of her friend's continued dedication despite Sarah's cruelty, "you kept working on the party even after I told you I never wanted to see you again." "I couldn't stop," Lisa said quietly, wiping tears from her eyes. "This party isn't about me or my feelings. It's about giving you something you've never had. Even if you hate me forever, you still deserve to be celebrated." The selflessness of Lisa's response hit Sarah like a revelation about the true nature of love and friendship. "I don't hate you," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I'm ashamed of myself. I'm terrified of how wrong I was and how much damage I might have caused." Lisa looked at her with something approaching hope. "Does this mean you'll let us explain everything?" "I don't need explanations," Sarah replied. "I need to apologize. I need to try to make up for not trusting the people who have never given me a reason not to trust them." That's when David appeared in the doorway, clearly having spent the night on Lisa's couch. His hair was disheveled and his clothes were wrinkled, but his face lit up with relief when he saw Sarah. "You found the folder," he said. "I found everything," Sarah replied. "David, I am so sorry. I am so ashamed of what I accused you of, what I believed about you and Lisa." David crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heart racing against her chest. "I should have told you," David said. "I should have found a way to explain without ruining the surprise. I should have realized that keeping secrets from you would trigger every fear you have about being abandoned." "No," Sarah said firmly, pulling back to look at him. "You should have been able to plan a surprise for your wife without her jumping to the worst possible conclusions. You should have been able to trust that I knew you well enough to believe in your character." She turned to include Lisa in the conversation. "Both of you should have been able to work together to do something beautiful for me without having your motives questioned." Lisa was crying again, but these were tears of relief rather than devastation. "Sarah, we love you so much. This party, everything we planned, it was because we wanted you to understand how much you mean to everyone whose life you've touched." "Show me," Sarah said suddenly. "Show me what you planned. I want to see everything." What followed was the most emotional hour of Sarah's life as David and Lisa revealed the comprehensive celebration they'd created for her. The decorations were elegant but warm, fairy lights woven through garlands of her favorite flowers, creating an atmosphere that felt magical without being overwhelming. The menu included dishes from her childhood that Lisa had somehow tracked down recipes for, including her mother's lasagna recipe that Sarah thought had been lost forever. But it was the memory wall that broke Sarah's heart completely. Lisa had contacted friends from every stage of Sarah's life, collecting photographs that traced her journey from a frightened 12-year-old in foster care to the confident attorney she'd become. There were pictures Sarah had never seen, photos from college friends, snapshots from law school, and images from the families she'd helped who had become part of her extended community. "How did you get these?" Sarah asked, staring at a photo of herself at 18, graduating from high school despite everything she'd lost. "I called Mrs. Patterson, your last foster mother," Lisa said. "She kept a photo album of all the kids who lived with her. She was so proud to hear about your law practice and wanted to contribute to your celebration." David pointed to another section of the wall. "These are from the families you've helped through the legal clinic." Lisa contacted them to ask if they wanted to contribute photos or letters for your birthday. Sarah stared at dozens of pictures showing her with children she'd helped reunite with parents, families she'd protected from domestic violence, and couples she'd guided through difficult divorces with their dignity intact. "They all wanted to come to the party," Lisa explained, "but we knew that would overwhelm you. So they contributed to this instead, a visual reminder of how many lives you've changed." But the most powerful element was something Sarah hadn't expected. "We wanted to include your parents," David said quietly, "but we weren't sure how to honor them without making you sad." He led her to a corner of the memory wall where Lisa had created a small shrine with photos of Sarah's parents, flowers in her mother's favorite colors, and a letter that Sarah had written to them years earlier but never sent. "How did you find this?" Sarah asked, recognizing her own handwriting on the letter she'd written during her first year of law school. "You left it in one of your old textbooks," David said. "I found it when we moved in together, but I never read it. I just kept it because it seemed important to you." Sarah opened the letter and read words she'd written to parents who would never hear them, gratitude for the values they'd instilled in her, updates on her life, and promises to make them proud by helping families stay together. "Lisa thought we should include it because your parents are part of this celebration too," David explained. "Everything you've become, everything you've accomplished, it's built on the foundation they gave you. When people love you enough to honor not just who you are but who shaped you into that person, how do you find words adequate to express your gratitude?" As Sarah processed the comprehensive nature of what David and Lisa had created, she realized this wasn't just a birthday party. It was a testament to a life well lived, a celebration of relationships that had survived loss and change, and a declaration that she was worthy of love that she'd never believed she deserved. "The guest list," Lisa said, pulling out her planning notes, "includes 32 people who specifically asked to be included when they heard we were celebrating you." Sarah read through names that represented every meaningful relationship in her adult life: college friends, law school classmates, colleagues from her firm, families she'd helped, and the chosen family she'd built through years of being someone others could count on. "Some of them are flying in from other states," David added. "Michelle's coming from Boston, James from Seattle, the Rodriguezes from Phoenix. People are spending their own money and time to celebrate you, Sarah." The scope of love represented by the guest list was overwhelming. These weren't people fulfilling social obligations. These were individuals who had made significant sacrifices to honor someone who had made a difference in their lives. "Sarah," Lisa said, "we know you're not comfortable being the center of attention. That's why we designed everything to feel like a family gathering rather than a formal party. The decorations are beautiful but not overwhelming. The activities focus on connection rather than spectacle. Everything is designed to make you feel loved rather than spotlighted." Sarah looked around Lisa's transformed apartment, at the evidence of weeks of planning, thousands of dollars of expense, and countless hours of coordination, and understood that she was looking at love made visible. "When is everyone arriving?" Sarah asked. "Tomorrow at 7, David replied. "We planned it for Friday evening instead of Saturday, so your actual birthday could be just the three of us if you wanted quiet time." "The three of us?" Sarah asked. Lisa smiled through her tears. "David and I thought maybe we could spend your actual birthday together, the three people who love each other most in the world." As Sarah absorbed the completeness of their love and planning, she realized that her worst fear, being abandoned by the people who mattered most, had been transformed into its opposite, being loved so thoroughly that two people would sacrifice weeks of their lives to celebrate her existence. "There's one more thing," David said, pulling out an envelope that Sarah hadn't seen in the folder. "This is from all of us, everyone who's coming to the party." Inside the envelope was a bound book titled, "Why Sarah Matters," filled with letters from everyone on the guest list, explaining how Sarah had impacted their lives and why they were grateful to know her. As Sarah read testimonials from people she'd helped, friends she'd supported, and colleagues who admired her work, she understood that she wasn't just loved. She was valued for the specific ways she made the world better for everyone around her. "David, Lisa," Sarah said, "I don't know how to thank you for this. I don't know how to apologize for not trusting that your love was real." "You don't need to apologize," David said. "You just need to let us love you the way you deserve to be loved." Tomorrow evening, 32 people would gather to celebrate Sarah Williams. But today, the three people who loved each other most were going to spend the day making sure that Sarah understood she was worthy of every moment of joy they'd planned for her. The climactic reversal that would transform Sarah's understanding of love from fear to acceptance came not during the elaborate party David and Lisa had planned, but in the quiet hours before it began, when Sarah finally found the courage to confront her deepest truth about deserving happiness. Friday afternoon, as vendors arrived to complete the final party preparations, Sarah sat with David and Lisa in the apartment that had been transformed into something magical, watching them coordinate details with the easy partnership of people united by shared purpose. "The flowers from Oregon arrived this morning," Lisa said, checking items off her list. "The caterer will be here at 5 to set up, and Michelle texted that she landed safely and will arrive with the other out-of-town guests at 7. "The memory wall is finished," David added, "and I confirmed that Mrs. Patterson's letter arrived with today's mail delivery." Sarah watched them work together and felt a complex mixture of gratitude, love, and terror that threatened to overwhelm her completely. "I need to tell you both something," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of a confession she'd never made to anyone. David and Lisa stopped their planning and turned to give her their full attention. "I'm scared," Sarah continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm terrified of tonight, not because of the party, but because of what it means." "What does it mean?" Lisa asked gently. "It means that people love me enough to sacrifice their time and money to celebrate me," Sarah replied. "It means that I matter enough for 30 people to travel and gather in my honor. It means that everything I believed about myself, that I was temporarily tolerated but never truly valued, was wrong." She looked at David and Lisa, who were watching her with expressions of complete understanding and patience. "For 18 years, I lived in a system where love was conditional and temporary," Sarah continued. "Every foster family, every placement, Every relationship reinforced the message that I was someone who could be discarded when I became inconvenient. The words came pouring out, years of carefully buried fears and assumptions that had shaped every relationship she'd built as an adult. Even with you, David, even after 8 years of marriage, part of me still expects you to realize that I'm not worth the effort. Part of me still believes that love is something other people deserve, but I have to earn through perfect behavior. David reached for her hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Sarah, you are the most deserving person I've ever known. You've spent your entire adult life making other people's lives better. You fight for families, protect children, and give your time and energy to anyone who needs help. But that's exactly why I'm scared, Sarah replied. What if the only reason people love me is because of what I do for them? What if when I stop being useful, I stop being worthy of love? Lisa knelt beside Sarah's chair, her face showing the pain of understanding exactly what Sarah was feeling. Sarah, Lisa said, I need you to listen to me. I love you not because of what you do for me, but because of who you are. I love your laugh when you think something is genuinely funny. I love how you cry during commercials with babies or animals. I love that you still sleep with a stuffed elephant you've had since you were 12. I love how you make grocery lists in color-coded categories, David added, and how you dance when you think no one is watching. I love that you still leave notes in library books for future readers to find. They were naming specific, intimate details about Sarah's personality, things that had nothing to do with her usefulness and everything to do with her essential self. The people coming tonight, Lisa continued, they're not coming because you helped them professionally. They're coming because knowing you has made their lives richer and happier. When you've spent your life believing love must be earned, how do you learn to accept that you're worthy of love simply for existing? That's when Sarah made the decision that would transform not just her evening, but her entire understanding of her place in the world. I want to see them, she said. I want to be there when they arrive. I want to look at every person who chose to celebrate me and try to believe that I deserve their love. As the sun set over Los Angeles, Sarah stood in Lisa's transformed apartment wearing a dress that David had secretly bought for the occasion, something elegant but comfortable that made her feel beautiful without being uncomfortable with attention. The first guests to arrive were Michelle and James, her closest friends from law school, who had flown in from opposite coasts to surprise her. Sarah. Michelle embraced her with the enthusiasm of someone who had been looking forward to this moment for weeks. You look beautiful. How does it feel to finally be properly celebrated? As more guests arrived, Sarah began to understand the true scope of what David and Lisa had created. These weren't just people fulfilling social obligations. They were individuals who had specifically wanted to honor her. The Rodriguez family brought homemade tamales and a photo album documenting how their children had grown since Sarah had helped them through their custody case. Mrs. Patterson, her former foster mother, arrived with a box of letters that other foster children had written about Sarah's influence on their lives. Carmen from the legal clinic brought artwork that her daughter had created specifically for Sarah's birthday, a drawing of Sarah as a superhero helping families. Dr. Williams from the Children's Hospital, where Sarah volunteered, brought a thank you card signed by every nurse on the pediatric ward. But the most powerful moment came when 10-year-old Diego Martinez approached her with a carefully wrapped gift. Miss Sarah, Diego said, my mama said you helped us stay together when the mean judge wanted to separate us. I made this for you. Inside the package was a hand-carved wooden heart with the words Family Protector etched into the surface. I learned woodworking in after-school program, Diego explained. Mama said you protect families, so I wanted to make you something that shows you're a protector too. As Sarah held the wooden heart and looked around the room at faces that reflected genuine affection, gratitude, and celebration, she finally understood what David and Lisa had been trying to show her. She wasn't loved because of what she accomplished or what she provided for others. She was loved because her existence made the world better for everyone who knew her. The party continued for hours, but it felt less like a formal celebration and more like a family reunion. People sharing memories, catching up on each other's lives, and creating new connections through their shared love for Sarah. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, each person made a point of telling Sarah specifically why her friendship mattered to them. "You taught me that I deserved better than an abusive marriage," said Elena, one of Sarah's former clients. "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," said Marcus, a colleague from the legal clinic. "You showed me that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up for you," said Jennifer, a friend from college. One by one, 32 people told Sarah that knowing her had changed their lives for the better. When the last guest had left and the three of them were alone in the apartment surrounded by flowers, empty dishes, and the remnants of celebration, Sarah finally found words for what she was feeling. "I spent my whole life believing that love was something I had to earn through perfect behavior," she told David and Lisa. "Tonight, you showed me that I've been loved all along, not for what I do, but for who I am." She looked at the memory wall, still glowing with fairy lights, displaying photographs that traced her journey from frightened child to confident woman surrounded by community. "David, Lisa," Sarah said, "this party wasn't just a birthday celebration. It was proof that I've built a life worth celebrating, with people who value me not as a helper or a fixer, but as a friend, a wife, and a person who belongs in their lives." 6 months later, Sarah Williams established the Chosen Family Foundation, using donations from her birthday party guests to create support networks for aging-out foster children. The foundation's motto, suggested by Diego Martinez, was "Everyone deserves to be celebrated." But the most lasting change was something that couldn't be measured in programs or policies. Sarah had learned to accept love without earning it, to believe in her own worth without proving it, and to trust that the family she'd built through choice was just as permanent and meaningful as any family created through blood. On her 31st birthday, Sarah didn't need a surprise party to feel loved. She woke up every morning knowing that she was surrounded by people who valued her existence, appreciated her contributions, and celebrated her presence in their lives. The woman who had once believed she was temporarily tolerated had discovered she was permanently cherished. And the love that had seemed too good to be true had proven to be the most reliable truth in her life. Sometimes the greatest surprise isn't a party, it's discovering that you've been worthy of love all along.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.